We've got this. We've got Mike Costello. I know who you are, and I'm Phil Ruff. There we go. Next up, acceptance of the agenda. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
That's 7 in favor, none opposed.
Thank you. Next up, approval of the minutes of October 18th, 2023. I was the only slacker that was absent, so I'm not gonna vote. But any edits?
I have one. Under new business, the I guess it's the last technical paragraph on the page. It says the garage will be a 40 by 60 metal building constructed on, I think it's supposed to be a slab as opposed to a slat.
Okay.
But maybe it was supposed to be slab.
No, it's supposed to be slab. It was just a typo. I'll fix it.
Any other comments? Those in favor of the amended minutes?
Oh, we need a motion.
Oh.
So moved.
Get a motion second.
I'll second.
Second. All those in favor of the minutes as amended?
That's 6 in favor with 1 abstaining.
Next up, new business. We have one item this evening. This is a discussion regarding staff proposed development review process improvements. Thank you, Belle.
Great. So I wanted to kind of walk you through some work that staff has been doing over the past few months on general process improvements and better communication, I guess I would say. So in general, one thing I'm really interested in and passionate about is making sure that we're involving the public, building trust with the public, but also making sure that we're providing enhanced customer service to applicants, and also making sure that, staff from the town side feels that they are involved in the development review process, and for everyone, that expectations are communicated clearly. So one of the things that I've been working on putting together is sort of updating existing documents. Honestly, more of just a stylistic change. So what was included in your packet was just a brief
No.
Okay. So what was included in your packet was just a brief overview memo, essentially summarizing what has been worked on. And then for your review, I included an updated site plan review process flowchart, which essentially updates this one, which was previously posted to the town website. I believe this has been in use since Evan was the planner. This has been in use for quite a while. So what I put together essentially updates that.
Can I stop you for a second? Can you describe the impetus for this? I know there's been some chatter on the council level, but was this directed by council? Is this just because you have ideas? Why are we doing this?
Yeah, so I think in general, this was staff driven, like by me, and the development review team, the code enforcement officer, the director of economic development, and the public works director primarily, although we work with others. And what I had realized when I started was that, essentially what I aim to do when I enter a role is to make sure that I am, again, appropriately engaging members of the community, feeling like they understand the process more than anything and feel like they can communicate their viewpoints, building trust with the community by responding to their questions and concerns, obviously to the extent possible within our existing ordinances and regulations, because I think, but making sure that that is well communicated to them, but then also making sure that the applicant feels like they, received good customer service during construction, they have a clear point of contact, and finally, that obviously the planning board is armed with the information that you need sufficient to render a decision following all of our existing ordinances. So this is mostly staff driven, from just my past experience as something that I'm interested in and passionate about. But then also when I first started, I began working with Pat, the code enforcement officer, and Rob, the public works director, on implementing some of the post planning board approval, but pre-construction items, namely implementing a pre-construction meeting process, which I understand was already becoming a condition of approval prior to Kyle's departure, from what I could tell from the files. But we actually put together a standard operating procedure for that I'll walk through. So yeah, essentially this was staff driven, and us, I think I would posit more of a stylistic change from how I prefer to work, basically. So one of the first things that I did was updated the existing site plan review timeline to be a little bit more clear to applicants. And that is what is up on the screen now. So I do want to just be very clear that this is not changing ordinance requirements. This is clarifying requirements, reminding applicants of said requirements, and sort of making sure that the process is clear in a more visual way. So that's what this was intended to do. Again, not changing any specific requirements, but working through our communication, really. And do you want to provide comment on that now, or do you want me to go through everything? And
what would you prefer? There's a lot of documents. It might be hard to save comments at the end of 6 or 7.
Yeah. Do you
maybe
want
one at a time?
Yeah. Let's I guess by way of introduction, I'll just start here. So this was the initial piece that I put together, and then all of the templates kind of flow into this, but let's gather comments on this first, if you have any, or really any comments on this process in general.
I do think this is welcome. I have heard, some town efforts to improve, the council level to improve communication, transparency. So if this can allow us to do our job better and help the public, help applicants, I'm all for that. So this is very welcome. So thank you.
I had a comment. It's a edit. Planning board public hearing typically the 3rd Wednesday of every month. Isn't it the 2nd?
No, it's the 3rd.
Is this the 3rd Wednesday?
It's the 3rd
Do
Wednesday.
you show up on the 2nd Wednesday too?
I don't know. I show up when you guys tell me I'm coming.
No, it's always the 3rd Wednesday.
I know November's a weird month this year.
Yeah.
Okay. Then cool. Then that's it.
Okay.
I noticed the top box there, you'd mentioned including at a minimum the town planner and code enforcement officer. I kind of like one of your later documents when you talk about it was the crew that might be involved in a pre-construction meeting, and you had as applicable. So when I was looking at that on the flow chart, I was looking because sometimes in some other towns, maybe you might include those as applicable because the town engineer might be engaged at that.
Yeah.
So, perhaps a mention of that. I mean, at a minimum, it's basically going to be you and Pat.
Yeah.
But there are occasions where a pre-app meeting with our engineer for larger projects would probably be welcome. So I just to identify that there, I thought might help.
Okay. Yep, I can do that.
All right. I have nothing. Let's see what I know. All right. So box number 4, town staff deems the application complete for the purposes of planning board, blah, blah, blah. Coordinates and newspaper posting. The thing that, just made me think about for all your documents and the improvements that we're reviewing tonight is it's always been such a challenge how to get the word out. So this is just the newspaper posting, but, making sure people get the word is just such a challenge. So this is just the public notice in paper, but
So the week after the public notice goes out and the agenda, once the agenda is complete, it goes on the website and gets added, attached to an event on the town calendar, which people can sign up for notifications for. A push notification does go out when I create the calendar event.
Yep.
I also create a Facebook post for the Monday before the meeting, which also links the agenda and encourages people to come back to the Facebook post or to the Facebook page that Wednesday to attend the meeting. And public notices, the agenda in physical form is posted in 5 places around town, including in the lobby downstairs.
It is such a challenge, and we talked about this, remember, at the comp plan level, about how difficult it is just to reach everybody, and no matter what you do, it's always such a challenge. So whether it's comp plan meetings or this process, I'm always trying to figure out ways to get the word out. And Jessica, you just read off a long laundry list. I'm not quite sure what more we can do to.
I mean, the agenda could be posted to the Facebook page the day that it's posted to the website. I'd be amenable to adding a second Facebook post. And that would have it on the Facebook page 2 weeks before the meeting.
Yeah.
And I should note, you didn't add this to your list, but it is something that we do on every public hearing.
Yeah.
Is sending the, obviously the direct ordinance required notification.
Yep.
Mailed to letters.
Oh, that's right. I did forget. I'm sorry. I forgot the abutter cards. Yeah, which we have now switched to using a brighter color cardstock in hopes that people will.
Right. Because that was a comment or something recently. Oh, I didn't see it, or whatever the case may be.
So the abutters postcards go out the same week that the agendas are posted.
Yeah.
There's only so much you can do. It's just, so in your travels, have you ever seen any other means to get the word out?
So my past experience tells me that sending direct mail is usually the best way to get as many people as possible. And it seems like we're already doing that to impact, especially the impacted parties.
Yeah, versus a letter, that probably wouldn't make a difference to me.
No, we do send letters when there's enough applicable information, or if there's a map that we want people to be aware of. With contract zones, you'll generally see a letter go out instead of a card.
Yeah.
It's also worth noting that the amount of abutters that the cards go to is set somewhere, I believe, in our ordinance. In the ordinance. Most districts, it's 500 feet. Every abutter within 500 feet. In the more dense districts like the VC or the HDR, it's 300.
And you called it, that's in your flow chart too, right? I remember
called
seeing
it
that
out in the template memo.
Oh, that's what it is. Yeah, I know I had seen that.
If there are concerns about communication at the comp plan level, I assume that would be then the time to look at whether or not those areas would be expanded.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. It's all a nonstop challenge. People say, "Oh, I never heard about this," and I haven't proved that. It's just tough enough. So next box, sorry. So applicants submit the blue box or 12 hard copies of final revised plan sent to town office for planning board members. In the past, you recall that that the amount of paper generated. So we have, I guess, some folks, rather than an enormous full-size plan set, I'm an engineer, I prepared the packets. It's pricey for applicants to have 12 full-size plan sets. So some folks in the past didn't mind smaller ones, but it just seemed like a good opportunity to bring this up again, what planning board members want in terms of application materials. So I know it's along those lines of maybe reducing some of the paper generated, but I don't recall. I think when Dave Thompson, he didn't necessarily need a full-size sheet. It was a lot of 11 by 17s, I think. So we went to some smaller size, just save a little effort, but I don't know what your thoughts are on that. I just figured I'd bring it up again because I don't think we've talked about it for a while.
Yeah. And I actually received this question recently from somebody intending to submit an application. Yeah. So if you prefer the full size, I'm happy to communicate that out. But if there is something like an 11 by 17 that would be acceptable, I'm sure that our smaller engineering companies especially would appreciate that.
Yeah, I like a full-size sheet. I can review them pretty easily.
Yep.
But I don't know if everybody wants one, but that's, running plots, all those full size, that gets fairly pricey, and I'm thinking of the applicants, but just reducing paper and those kinds of things. So does anybody have a preference what you would like in a packet?
I would like a full-sized one because if I'm interested in certain details,
Right.
I can't make them out on the small one.
Yeah, me as well. I like it, just like, that's my preference. And if that's what we end up at, that's fine. But other people might.
I view it on this computer screen too.
Yeah.
And I can enlarge it as much as I want.
Okay, so
You know, when you send it out, that's generally where I first view it.
okay. So you wouldn't mind if you didn't have the full plan set? I mean, this might not apply to a lot of projects, but
When some of ours I get pretty in depth and it's a lot of conversation, I'll pull that out.
Yeah.
Because then I don't have access to the screen on my social on. But I can get by with the smaller one.
yes, we're not important enough to get the iPads that counselors are issued. Maybe planning board. We can have our own ones at meetings and we can zoom in. But
I'm not as qualified to read them as you are.
Yeah.
So the difference between the two, I'm not looking as detailed like you are.
Okay. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
yes, no, it makes perfect sense.
I'm just gonna copy that. And if I have questions, I usually pull it up on Google Maps, actually. I'll look at the, the smaller one, and then I'll look it up on Google Maps and be like, okay, what's around this, right? Because I'm usually more interested in what's around it. So that's what I do. I just pull things up on Google Maps.
Like what we had with the Boy Scout with the solar panels.
Yeah, I pulled that up on
knew where
Google
it was,
Maps.
but it helped to see it visually from up above.
Yep.
Yeah.
On my own.
Lisa, what do you prefer?
I'll go with whatever the majority wants. I'm easy.
It sounds like it's going to be a combo. So
Yeah.
I want a full-size sheet. Krista wants a full-size sheet, and we've got two that don't. So I don't think it's one or the other. I think it can be, and what I'm
you're
getting
saying-
at is maybe we say,
Need 5 of
rather
them.
than 12, you're giving us 5. Yeah. So
I see.
the
Okay.
town staff needs, so you probably have a full-size sheet.
Yeah.
But I'm just wondering what those numbers would be. So,
I guess I like the full size sheet.
okay. Mr. Baer.
Seems like a waste of paper.
Okay.
If we had the option to do it electronic.
Okay.
I feel the same.
Okay, so we've got 4. I can't speak for Judd. He's all we're missing, right?
Mhm.
Yep. So there's 4 and 3. So maybe if we do what, 5 and 5 full-size sheet.
Okay.
You guys can do the math, but we've had.
They provide us with a digital copy, I can print
There you
anything
go.
on an 11x7. Perfect.
I would make applicant. You make them give you the 11
We get
by
it digital
17.
generally anyway, because we post it for you, so.
I don't want the town paying any money for developing application materials. So they either submit, we ask, maybe you just say we want 5 full-size sheets and the rest are on 11 by 17, but don't spend any town money on their application. We don't need to do that.
No, I understand what you're
Don't
saying.
waste your time.
Taxes high enough as it is.
Yeah, that burden should be on an applicant, but I think we can reduce some of the cost by cutting those numbers of plan sets.
Okay,
All right.
can do that.
And the last question, okay, pink box down the bottom to the left, the rectangle.
Yep.
Has that always been I think within 35 days? I'm just trying to remember. Is that what's in
Yes,
the books?
that is in the books on the ordinance. I
Yeah.
recognize you usually make a decision same day.
Yeah.
But if you ever did want to table further deliberation, you have the option to.
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
And then I did forget one more. So application materials.
Mhm.
And we haven't harped on this in the past, but and Jessica, I know recently it's been, we'll get packets maybe a couple weeks in advance, but I always want to make sure, and I think you made the comment here that town staff needs a chance to review stuff, but we always, the 30 days has been on the books because we would get information, right before the meeting. And just so you know, we've been very clear. I am not reviewing anything more than maybe a 1-page tiny letter the day of the meeting.
Perfect.
I'm not, and the board shouldn't be reviewing new significant material like in the 2 minutes we have before a meeting. That just doesn't work. A letter, some support stuff, but generally we need time.
So I like to communicate the at least 30 days.
Yes.
I'm actually going for, if it's a large application, I'd like to see that 45 days, maybe more in
That'd be great.
advance for me, so
Yeah.
that I have adequate time to coordinate with all of the staff that need to review it myself, communicate thoroughly with the applicants. It's more of a customer service piece for me.
Yeah.
That I can't do my best work if I'm only getting something 2 weeks in advance.
That's great. So we've always been pretty consistent, but that same day dumping stuff on our bench is just does more.
Okay, perfect.
Oh, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the intention is that the board should only be responsible for reviewing whatever we put into the packet that is sent to you the Wednesday or Thursday before.
Right.
So.
And sometimes we just give them a little slack, but I remember some engineers or applicants try to drop stuff, and that's just not appropriate.
Yeah.
For projects.
Yeah.
You know, you get us your materials ahead of time. If they can't do that, then that's on them.
Yeah.
All I got on this. Anybody else?
So then the next thing that I put, well, actually, maybe it makes sense to go through this in sort of the order that it occurs. So once we get an application in, the next step is for staff to review it for initial completeness. It is not my style ever to send you something that is incomplete. So we're reviewing things, including providing comments from every town reviewing department as soon as we get an application within 10 days. We're getting back to them. So what is up on the screen now is it's a very rough template application completeness letter. So this would be a determination that the application is incomplete. It's kind of interesting. The ordinance specifically requires that this is coming from Pat. So how we've been handling it is we've sort of been working together and collaborating on drafting this letter if needed. Although since I've been here, we've only had complete applications submitted, which has been nice. But this would be how it would look if I was going to communicate about items that need to be added. So every town reviewing department, including our engineering peer reviewer, would submit their comments to me, and I would put them in this completeness letter. Obviously, completeness items are things that are required by ordinance to be submitted. However, we also have sort of the, as you have probably recognized, the ability to at least ask for the things that might make the application better, add a, allow the application to meet sort of some policy items in the comprehensive plan that aren't specific ordinance requirements. So the advisory comments are what we'd be providing to the applicant as sort of more of that, well, it would be nice to see this. It's also our place to, again, provide good customer service around, just so you know, this would be an additional requirement that's required by the town, a street opening permit, a building permit, any other outside permitting would be in the advisory comments section. Something for them to be aware of, but not something that is required for application completeness. And then once it's actually determined complete, they would just get this front page and it would be, determined complete and scheduled for a public hearing with you all. So any comments on, I think this is generally the process that you've been following. It's just formalizing that a little bit more. Actually, I know that this is the process that you've been following. But yeah, just, actually providing written determinations to people for the file. Yeah.
So I'm just thinking of your recommendations, the advisory comments.
Mm-hmm.
Would this be part of the packet? Would these letters need to be in that packet?
Yes, so the letters would be provided in your packet. I think we provided you the DB one last
I've never
month.
seen a completeness, but I don't really mind if this is
yeah. So we would provide it for you all to understand this is what staff asked them to provide. And usually what I'll do is if it's a completeness item and once they've addressed it, I will cross it out here so you can still see what it said, but then for, right underneath how they responded to it.
Okay.
So the reason you didn't see this last time is because the DME application was complete. So the only letter you received was much shorter and all it said was your packet is your packet is complete.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that may be why it didn't stick in your mind, because it wouldn't have had.
I didn't review much because I wasn't going to attend last time. That's probably why I
Well,
didn't see
anyone who
it.
did review the packet would have seen a much shorter letter.
Thank you. Yeah.
And yeah, just to kind of reiterate, I'm not sending anything to the planning board that hasn't at least attempted to address all of the relevant requirements. You know, I want to provide something that can eventually be approved in my estimation. So I'm not sending things that are not complete, but at least you'll know what was reviewed from the staff side.
Any comments on these? I have nothing.
So then the next step after being determined complete would be I would put together my review memo. This probably looks very similar to the one that Kyle was putting together. I took some of your feedback from last month about the tables with the lot dimensions and building placement. So we'll keep those going forward. And then, you know, any sort of unique issues. I know that there's some things that you typically like to hear about. So the traffic, natural areas, stormwater, drainage, lighting, that will all be in here as usual, as well as anything else that I want to flag for your attention. I also took your feedback about that you liked the template motions. So I added some additional ones. So a reminder that a public hearing needs to be opened. And then also if there are any waivers requested by the applicants as part of their application, the planning board does need to make a formal finding on that and whether it is appropriate. So I've put in a draft motion there, just again, to help you all, and then put in staff's formal recommendation and a draft motion for consideration. And this would be all assuming that you agree with my recommendation. Obviously, I'm happy to help with draft motions as normal, but
Things. So sometimes I ask, or it's not clear to me when I'm reviewing a packet, even, you know, depending on the size of the project, but sometimes we get engineering comments, sometimes we don't. As long as that's clear, so I don't have to think about it. I just want to know in your memo, I'm just going to the drainage stormwater paragraph, and, you know, just state if no review was town staff deemed no review is necessary, something like that. If it's a simple project and Manny doesn't need to be involved, but it's helpful to know, because a lot of times I flag that if I don't see a letter on a project, I think Mandy might chime in. Then I usually flag it. But if you state it clearly, I don't have to ask that question.
Sure.
Typically, so I'm just wondering on the public hearing, again, you've got a lot of sample motions. Are you saying motion and second and vote on that? Or that, to me, I don't want to overdo Robert's rules here. To me, the practice that's worked is that we have the applicant. I think she and I and Mitch talked a while ago after she came on board, so we just had a discussion about some stuff. So I told her some of our preferences, told her about what the board's done, but with that one, typically applicant says stuff, and then my goal is, you guys know this, to have as much information out there before the public hearing. So that's the purpose. You have the applicant tell us, but you know, they might not tell us everything. So then I would ask Kyle, and now I'm going to ask Isabel to fill in the gaps for that, because a lot of time in theory that heads off, or could head off comments from the public. That's the point of that, purposeful in doing that. So then you gauge that, and I ask for comments from the public, and then I just say, you know, no more comments, open up the public hearing. I make that call. I don't know that we need a motion and the vote for every single thing we do. That seems a little excessive to me, to open and close. I don't know that we need a motion.
So I agree with you on public hearings specifically. Yep. On waivers, you do need to make a formal finding.
No doubt.
Okay.
And that's, just to be clear, you remember the waiver process before we review and go through findings of fact and the whole discussion on the application. Waivers first, we knock those off because we'll discuss it, but before we get to, you know, voting on an application, we're always doing waivers first with a motion, second, the whole bit. Okay. And discussion. It's just I don't think we need to have roll calls to open a public hearing or close. I think I can just make that call.
Okay. I will say there may be instances where we have a more controversial. I am fine with that on most projects.
Yeah, that's the thing. I gauge things too, and you can kind of tell. I was like, okay, this is going to be a while, and you figure out based on applications, I adjust. Yeah. Strategy a little bit. But
yeah,
I just say a motion to open a public hearing. I think if we've had our discussion, I don't know that just Robert's rules is if that necessary to say, have everybody say we can open them.
Yeah, I would hate to think that we would say no.
Yeah, I know, that just seems excessive. Yeah. I'm a creature of habit, so I wouldn't mind leaving on. We don't need motions to open and close. Are people okay with, I usually gauge, if we're not talking about anything, like, okay, open the public hearing. And I often, if there's a bunch of people in the audience, I'm telling them, I explain that process.
Great.
Is because if I see a full house, I let them know, it's like, look, this is what we're going to do. We're going to hear from the applicant, we're going to hear from the planner, and then we're going to discuss things. And then we want to hear all your comments, and then you open it up. So depending on how many people or the type of project, we make it really clear. That's always,
okay.
Just depends on the application.
Perfect. I think a lot of this is me trying to figure out your workflow too. Yeah, so I'm happy we're having
this will all sort out, but your ideas are very well.
I think you found that when people do engage in the public hearing, even if it was previously qualified and said, they're going to say it anyway. They brought it with them.
Yeah, that's true.
And they want it on record, or they brought it for somebody else that asked them to put it on record.
Yeah.
So it's going to be said anyway.
Yeah.
So that gives that fair chance to.
Definitely. Yeah.
Okay.
One question on page 4, your suggested standard conditions. Number 4, you just said applicants and their contractors are well advised. I'm just thinking, applicants, hey, this is just a sample, but I added it into butters because butters should be well advised to familiarize themselves with what the town ordinances are. Because a lot of projects, even some recent stuff that was common in one of our recent public hearings about, all the noise and all that stuff. And I don't know if butters actually understand what the town rules are. So either way, I just threw in the butters because I think it comes up a lot.
Yes.
What it's worth. Yep. Oh my God.
Right. Anything else on the template planners report? Template memo? Okay. And I'll just briefly run through the findings of fact. I think that this looks pretty similar to what you've been experiencing in the past. I think my process is to be pretty detailed. I've been told that I produce a lot of paperwork. So yeah, I like to be pretty detailed on the findings of fact. My approach there is that, if you get a question and I'm not around, if 10 years from now, when none of us are around, they get a question about how the planning board came to a conclusion on something, I want to have it documented in the findings specifically. So you'll kind of probably saw from the last one, you'll probably start to see longer findings of fact documents from me. That's again, sort of a stylistic choice, but is really helpful when we're trying to answer questions from neighbors, from applicants on their own projects, from whomever, why did the planning board approve this? What was their thought process behind this? And I can actually point to it and say, well, the applicant submitted information about the traffic and there will be this many trips generated and that's under this level of service. And so that's why the planning board came to this conclusion. And it's all right there in one document that we can provide, rather than having to say, here's the file, go through it at your leisure. Again, coming back to the customer service piece.
A little bit of background. We did discuss this item. Isabel told me her preference when the 3 of us met, told me her preference to have more information in the findings of fact. And my only comment at the time was, it's already long enough for me to read like 2 pages for every findings of fact. So if I told her I really don't have any interest in reading a 5-page document into the record. So what she told me was that we could just refer to that. Explain that again, because I don't, for every big project, I don't want to read that.
So I'm gonna jump back. This is back to the planner's report and the recommended motions. So I will draft the findings as Kyle was drafting them for you previously. And what I would suggest is when you're making your motion, you would reference per the findings of fact. We can even say included in the meeting packet and dated for the meeting date. And then the only thing you would have to read would be the conditions.
Right. So that was the only thing when I'm looking at this, because we have a lot of discussion. We're adding things, we're adding conditions, and it was just how to make sure we capture the condition or additional conditions above what you recommend. Yeah. Just as long as that's clear. So
you weren't at the last one.
Yep.
And I think Lisa, you did the motion, right? And for our last meeting, and you pointed out, oh, it's all right here.
Oh, so right. I mean, you just said read that, and I said, oh, right. And I read that.
Trying to capture it all together and feel nervous about getting it right. It's right there.
Yeah. So if we're adding motions, so last month, so we have staff recommendations and then just capturing. So again, just like you tend to be, a motioner, a lot of times. So just having enough information, or you're writing notes to add to that, or
so
extra conditions, or
if it, yeah, I mean, if it's that bolded thing that says per the findings of fact included, then we don't have to worry about that. Right. All we have to worry about is the special recommendations or conditions or whatever.
Okay. So any conditions that you have that we don't dispute, that's just in the reference to findings of fact.
Right.
And you're just capturing extra ones.
Yeah.
Yeah. With the following extras.
With the following extras.
Okay. Yeah. All right. That sounds good.
So it just decreased your workload, actually.
The decrease?
It decreased.
No, that's what I was all over. That's like, yeah, I don't have to read that.
And I mean, of course, I want to be clear that if you don't agree with my recommendation, if there are changes to findings, it would always be within your right to change those on the fly during the meeting, as you probably have been. But just wanting to make it as easy as possible for you.
We discussed transparency, and I just wasn't sure if you have such a complete document before we even approve it. My concern was the appearance of, they rubber stamped it, it was all set, but you explained it differently to me, that in just a different perspective, that no, I mean, your comment was transparency by providing it ahead of time with a thorough review.
Yes.
Which I'm okay with.
You could even add on an agenda item that says, does anybody have a problem with findings of fact?
Yep.
So that we address that at the meeting, like after our discussion about the plan.
Because again, depending on a project, sometimes if it's really simple, I just blow through all the findings. I'll just read down Kyle's list, not have a yay vote, and just see if anybody has problems at the end. If there's people in the audience or it's a contentious, I go through and kind of remind people that, just again for the the public, look, we discussed this at length. We talked about this, just reinforcing some of those discussions. Not that it's necessary, but I'm, again, thinking of abutters and all that get upset, just pointing out, like reminding them, yeah, we discussed this, so I don't know.
Transparency and the public and this document, once it's finalized in the meeting, I create a PDF of the findings of fact as opposed to the proposed findings of fact.
Yes.
And it gets added to the public materials folder, which is then archived every month. So the public can go back to when we began that archive, which I think was 3 or 4 months ago, and look at all the planning board documents that were a part of the application. And this finalized findings of fact is put in after the meeting is done, along with any approval letters or any additional documentation. And I will add that my plan is to provide my proposed findings of fact in the public packet on the website as well, so that the public can see, yes, they won't go in there. Yep. These are what they're reviewing. Oh, what is this reference to section 18177A? Let me go look at that. Kind of reinforcing that we're never just making this stuff up. We're reviewing a set of standards that is already existing. So that's kind of my
approach.
I mean, you guys can all recall that many meetings, public or abutters seem to come in and think like, oh, it's already a done deal. And over the years, you have several comments. Oh, you know, you've already approved this, or it's a done deal. There seems to be some perception. And I think that's probably with every planning board out there, but just making sure that people know we've talked about it. We've got these findings of fact. Again, it's just a transparency issue with me, but I don't want them thinking, again, that perception somehow to break through. I don't know if you can, but.
I mean, I think sometimes the public doesn't understand what we do, right? They don't understand that we're following ordinances, right? And just because they don't like having this shop next to them or whatever.
No, exactly.
If it meets our standard, we have to approve it.
Right.
So, and you've been pretty good about pointing that out.
Yeah,
at times
another thing. It
seems like controversial.
Other comments on that? I mean, this was a big deal to me, but it's, you know, it's just the transparency.
I just want to, you know, kind of to that point, it would be nice to say, does anybody have any problems with this? And just make sure that it's on the public record that we've read through them and we did acknowledge that, you know, because if we're not reading them into the record, which I'm also for.
Yeah.
Right, that saves us a lot of time. And just, you know, as long as we're acknowledging that we did in fact read through them. And
so I'll try to reinforce that like during the meeting. So somehow before the motion, just again, bring it up without going through everything. Just make sure that we're set before we get to motion stage. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
And then I'm trying to be cognizant of time here, so I'm going to run through this quickly, but I didn't provide this in your packet. One thing that has worked really well for me in other communities is when I'm called upon to, and we haven't talked about this yet either, but so when I am called upon to do my planner's report, having a presentation prepared so that anyone in the public who hasn't looked at the packet, who kind of got something in the mail but then never followed up on it on our website or in any of the places you mentioned, can see it. So I put together today this like draft presentation that I'd like to get your feedback on. So essentially what my plan would be is to go through the proposal when I'm called upon to do my planner's report. And I would provide an overview because like you mentioned, I think that's helpful for people to understand where it is. So I would provide an aerial of the project, an overview of the the key facts about the project. This is just an example, but then show the site plan on the screen so that anyone assembled can see that. Show the elevations drawings or the architectural renderings if they've been submitted. And then kind of go through the same unique, I'm not wedded to calling them unique issues, but the unique issues that I talked about in my review memo as well. So that if the public is showing up fresh to this and they haven't read anything posted on the website, I'm going through it for their benefit. So I would sort of walk through what I have found in my review of the application in terms of using as an example, trees and natural resources, traffic access and parking, drainage, stormwater, erosion control issues, lighting and signage. And then I would also touch on the requested waivers and the staff recommendation on those waivers. So either from myself or any of the development review team and any of my recommended conditions. So you would see that my planner's report would be a little bit longer, most likely, but it would at least provide the public who is assembled another opportunity to review things if they haven't already. And I recognize that I'm coming to you with this kind of fresh. So if this sounds crazy, just let me know. But
no, I'm just trying to figure out, and I just have a comfort level how we've been doing things, not that I'm locked into that, but again, I explained that have the applicant talk about their project, and then basically I would defer to Kyle and now you just to, again, add additional information, fill in those blanks. So are you saying this would be night of the planning board, the applicant would set up and then you would have your own presentation after that?
Or I could go first, go through it, show their stuff on the screen. They tend to like that. The engineers tend to like that because they don't have to bring the paper, the paper copies on their easel set up for folks. So I'll kind of go through it first and then they'll add anything. maybe reversing the order. Again, open to feedback, but.
Yeah, different from what we've done, have done in the past, but I don't know if I have a problem with that. What do you?
We could try it, and if we don't like it, we can convert.
Yes.
Yeah.
It makes a lot of sense, right? If we have two things on our docket,
yeah.
and we have, you know, oftentimes we'll have two things on our docket. The public cares about just one thing, but they're here for two and they have no idea what's going on with the other one. This gives them, even if they did their homework on the thing they care about, this gives them kind of a visual. And I do think it would probably make a more informed public when they're here.
On the flip side, I'm just thinking of one recent presentation. It was Jeff Aceto. Remember he had, I mean, they had everybody there trotting them out. I think it was Tyler. There we go. Yeah, and so, but they had the whole crew, and they had that presentation all lined up. Jeff spoke for, I mean, it was like 15 minutes, and then the architect gets up. So I'm just thinking of some folks, they come in already, and I'm just wondering, I don't, you know, I like to keep meetings moving. So I'm just trying to figure out if that would be really redundant. They have their own presentation with a lot of the same material, so.
We could ask that the applicants communicate that to us, in which case Isabel could always cut back her presentation for that meeting.
Yeah.
So it might help them because she may focus on the pieces there, and sometimes they talk about a lot of things that don't necessarily, they're not things that you're looking at or don't have any, you know, sometimes they expound a lot more than they do. So it might narrow their focus on reiterating the pieces that she's
I'm not
thinking the opposite sides. It might help them understand what to present.
Yeah.
You know, as opposed to this shotgun approach of I got all this stuff and here it comes and I have 12 people.
Yeah, no, I think this is great. You know, so it sounds like we have a couple in support. What others think of this? Just
for Tyler, they're from the Portland area, right? So maybe they had a bigger audience and more presentation need down there than we required up here. Maybe.
And I do think that, you know, I'm in the kind of, when I'm going through an application review, I'll get the question of, are you going to do a presentation?
So that's what I was wondering. If you prep them and let them know, that'd be. So even you just don't want to waste a bunch of time having two similar presentations. It's again, just like things rolling.
So I can communicate that with them, that, you know, I'll do this presentation. Here's a copy of it even.
Okay, so there you go.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
And your presentation is probably more public friendly than theirs.
Probably.
A little bit more specific at least.
Does this sound, want to give this a shot? So Isabel would go first. Do a presentation, then they can fill in the blanks now, and you'll prep them and just say, hey, you know, just let you know, give them a copy, and then they can adapt. Yeah, I think that would work.
Well, it might save us some time too.
Yeah, sure. I'm willing to give all this.
If we, you know, if we try this for next meeting probably, and it doesn't work, and you're like, that was horrible, Isabel, don't ever do that again. I'm totally happy to just not do that. I don't really have an ego about this stuff. So just, you know, let me know.
Just a good new perspective. I like it.
And then the last thing I'll just run through really quickly. This is more from the staff side, but you saw in my last application that I reviewed that I put a condition around holding a pre-construction meeting. This was something that Rob, the public works director, had been pushing for a while, and something that I worked on in one of my first jobs was essentially coordinating this for our department. So this is really intended, again, as a customer service piece from staff to communicate our expectations during construction. It also lets me reiterate to the applicants, this is what the planning board's conditions of approvals were. This is what we're kind of expecting from you, and lets them put like a face to the code enforcement officer, anyone that they haven't yet met, because, you know, for a couple of months at least, they're usually just working with me directly. So this lets me sort of introduce the rest of our team, and is more of a customer service piece. And it's really intended to reiterate everything that I noted in the agenda. So really everything that is a frequently asked question during construction, we will discuss it at this meeting, take notes, and provide the applicants with those notes so that they can reference it. as they're going through their process.
No, I'm not sure that this would have headed off that Stillwater.
That's what I was going to ask about. Like, what is that? Would this help?
Yeah.
People from destroying wetlands, for instance, that we told them not to destroy. Would that?
So what I would tell you is it allows us to have the conversation up front and then refer back to that conversation if they are starting to go off course. And I think what has happened in the past is there have been projects you're like, oh, it's not that big, so it's not a big deal. One of the struggles we have in Orono is stormwater mitigation during the construction process that in most communities they talk about, but there's less of an emphasis on it. And we know here that if there is one tire track coming out of a site, we get calls. And so we need to make sure that people understand how serious that is. And that's a big one for us, is that we're all great. So I think for us, that is very helpful to start at the beginning to say, here are all the rules. Here's what we're going to hold you accountable. So when I show up, because there's X, you know why I'm here.
I mean, Orono used to have this reputation. I remember ages ago, oh, Orono is such a tough town, but I've been on the board 17 years, and I think we have turned down one project. The review, when Evan came on board, he streamlined things. Kyle improved things. Now this just keeps moving the ball ahead. I don't need to have the reputation. Oh, you can't do business in Orono, but I mean, I just want to be thorough and fair. But this gets the word out. I think this is a big improvement. This is welcome.
And a lot of the things that we discussed are based on perception that has been there. Yeah, and the answer to that is not that it's hard to do business. Yeah. It felt a lot like they didn't have all the information. So the goal has always been, since day one, if you were going to do X, this is all the information. So you know what you're getting into. You're not all of a sudden find out you've got to do X, Y, and Z that you didn't know you had to do, which costs you more money or those things. It doesn't change the rules. It just clearly states the rules and how we're going to work through that together to help you have a successful project. Yeah. And I think that's been the goal.
One of the hard things was cell phone towers.
Yes.
In the steeples.
Yes.
Because the public perception was totally different than what we were.
Yeah.
And they were totally against it, like you said.
But again, we had to go by standards, and their professionals provided their professional opinion on the impacts of 5G and whatever else. And that's all, I mean, what we have to go on. Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I talked a lot about the planning board process, like during the meeting, and that's for customer service for the abutters or the neighbors. This one is really for customer service for the applicants. Yeah. So kind of hitting it from both angles to make sure that we're doing that.
Great.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's the end of what I wanted to show you tonight. Thank you for your feedback. And again, we'll see how it goes. And if you want to change anything, we can keep having a conversation. But
what do we have on tap?
So we have received an application for the Alpond Arena project, the expansion into that parking area behind it that will be on the agenda for the 20th. We may have one additional project, the site plan for 74 Mill Street, which you guys had looked at a contract zoning application on a long time ago at this point. They may be submitting, but they still have a few more days to actually get their application in, and I haven't heard from them yet. So
any ordinances that we're going to be working on? Anything coming out of council, that the committees, comp plan stuff?
Yeah.
I mean, you're on the eve of the starting the comprehensive plan again. So I think that those are always opportunities when you talk about people that are getting frustrated with it feels like it's just rubber stamp, is that's where your voice is heard, right? Because that's where you're making these rules that are governing this process. And I think
we plug that as often as we can. Just come on. Hopefully we'll get the word out.
Yeah.
Because that was a nice process last time. Good. Anything else? Next up is adjournment. Can we get a motion?
Okay.
Second. All those in favor? I didn't ask for discussion. I wasn't gonna take any.
Favor, none opposed. Great, thanks, everyone.
Thank you. That was nice.